Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Ruby AI podcast. New year, new us. Right, Joe?
New year, new us. Yeah, I'm Joe Leo. I'm your co-host, and I'm curious, Valentino, how did you celebrate Ruby's 30th birthday?
In Claude code. Like everybody else, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's us to celebrate. You get that little Martian on the screen and, you start feeling happy.
No, I was pretty excited to see all of the design stuff updating. It was definitely way outdated. Like you go search for Ruby as a language and you get to this 1990s style website with just like raw links to stuff. It got you the information. You got there and you're like, if you're a kid looking at that page in this day and age, like, is this something I should be using? Right? Like you kind of got that feeling. And now I feel like it's in a much better direction. Like definitely looks like something modern, which 30 years, that's a long time.
30 years is a long time. And this does say something about your co-hosts, if you're listening at home, that if you are in your 20s perusing the website, we say that, yes, that means that you're a kid. That says something. I think here's another thing that says something. We talked just before we hit record about the release of Ruby 4, and nobody seems to really be paying attention to that. And I think at first I was disappointed by that. Of course, I'm writing a book on the Ruby programming language, or we're updating the well-grounded Rubyist. And so it would have been nice if we knew a little sooner that things were going to go from 3 to 4 on December 25th of 2025. But then we started updating the book and realized, oh, okay, there's not a ton that has changed. And I think that was initially disappointing. I went through like the 3 phases. First, disappointed. Second, oh, it's all about ractors. I don't use ractors because I'm not a good enough concurrent programmer. So then I beat myself up a little bit. And then the third stage where I'm at right now is acceptance and saying, actually, isn't it nice that a major version of Ruby can be released and people are not freaking out in a good way or a bad way? They're like, okay, this is good. We've done this before and we know how to handle it. Nothing's going to go crazy and break. We've reached this point of sort of relative stability in the Ruby programming language. What do you think?
I tend to agree with that. I was at the Ruby Kaigi where they were like, for Ruby 3, and they were like, we're going to make Ruby 3 times faster. This was ages ago, 2015, right? And so I feel like the mentality then was, okay, people keep saying Ruby's not performant, and maybe we should do something about that, right? And like, it was super impressive. They did it. They made it faster than the previous version, right, of 2.0, and 3 times faster. And like, of course, it actually got faster than that. Shopify dumped a ton of money into making it like Rails even way more performant than that. And so if you're outside of the Ruby community and all of a sudden it's like, oh, Ruby's 3 times faster now, it makes you stop and pause. Like, is it scalable? Can we say these arguments anymore, right? It makes people question and talk about it. And I feel like 4.0 is more of the stability like you're talking about. Can we get it a concurrent parallelism? Is that possible in Ruby? I feel like that's the other thing people say. Well, you can't do parallelism. You can't really do in Python either, or a number of other places. True concurrency, right? I feel like we've caught up at least to Python in that way, where we're finally starting to see, well, we can actually run the same kind of parallelism that you can in Python, which is like kind of huge in that way. And hopefully it means more data aspect of things can start getting adopted in Ruby. One of the biggest things I feel like isn't talked about, and maybe just because it's experimental or not, was this whole Ruby box feature, which I don't know if you saw.
I did see it.
Right? It like lets you scope all of the classes and constants into like a fenced area.
Yeah, and this was whispered about at RailsConf. And I don't know exactly where I heard it. I started picking up on it from other people saying, oh, this is going to be a really big deal, which sounds interesting. For example, library maintainers and library builders. But I'm curious to hear what your thought is on how that's worked or how you see it working in practice.
The biggest thing I saw is they're documenting it now of being able to run these boxes in parallel to execute blue-green deployment as an example, or like evaluate dependency updates, right? Like you can start doing a lot of code transitioning because you have these boxes that can work together.
So the box is not meant to remain as simply namespace and sort of guardrails, but actually to start to become a feature of parallelization.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the hope, is that these things can start become their own like process level adaptation. And hopefully it evolves too into like a wider binary distribution. Right now, you got to use these third-party bundling and packaging services in order to like make your Ruby binary a thing, so that it can actually compile all of the Ruby source that you need for it into that single executable.
Yeah, and I seem to remember some kind of vague controversy over those packaging services last year. I don't know. It was a year ago. We don't have to talk about them anymore. But yes, go on.
That's like a whole other topic, right? Like, how do you even do that? The latest I've seen was Brad Gessler. He does the terminal wire stuff. And he was like, oh, and I use this tobacco packaging library, and it works great cross-platform, Ruby binary distribution. And it works great. It like works with like Homebrew and like apt, and it just makes it all really easy to do. But again, it's like a third party, right? Like it's not like the Ruby core team saying, hey, this is how you package a binary and distribute a Ruby app. If you wanted to make a Claude code, I just had this problem. I made a Claude memory Ruby gem that uses like SQLite and just the full text search, so that you can like just hook up into the hooks of Claude and get it to have long-term memory. And I basically used like Ovi Fernandez's recent article on his Nexus project. And I found like another person had a like competing article on like how like time should be considered for like these entity graphs. And so like I just combined all the ideas together and made this thing. And then I start up Claude and it's like, oh, I can't find the executable for like your Claude memory gem. Great. Like now I have like path problems, and like, how does Claude find on its path the executable for the Ruby gem? And I'm just like, this is getting way too much. And so I'm like, all right, how do you distribute a Ruby binary, right? So like somebody could just brew install it, and then that's part of the setup script. And then Claude can just reference the binary on the system.
And this is a non-trivial problem. I actually did this a million years ago. I was working at Credit Suisse. We could talk about it now because Credit Suisse isn't really around anymore. But I had to write C# code all day long. It was not fun. And I did this for a couple of years. But we were building a desktop application. And so we thought, okay, well, in order to, at my boss's request, we needed a way to skirt around the teams that were responsible for like approving and moving code to like staging and to production, basically like to avoid DevOps so that we could go to production really quickly, which is not okay and not allowed. But, he's my boss. So I said, yeah, let's do it. And I said, here's how we could do it. We can have a tiny little web server running in the background, and it can look for updates. And if there's an update, then when the person fires up the little desktop app, we'll update it before the thing opens, and we're done. So of course I wanted to use Ruby. Ruby was not allowed at Credit Suisse. It was not approved by security. So I had to install it myself, and I had to install it library by library, like all the different dependencies. And it's not trivial, even on, I think that was like a RHEL server, right? So on a little RHEL box or a big RHEL box, I'm like SSHing in, and I'm trying to install like one dependency at a time and one DLL at a time, trying to fix the different stuff that breaks in C. Yeah, it's non-trivial. And then when you get to this, and that was years ago, and now when you get to this point where there's different compilers, there's things changing all the time, that could be a real challenge.
Yeah, and luckily, I don't know if it's Bundler solved this, but you can like include precompiled binaries for like system level dependencies too in your gems now, which is really great. And that solves a lot of problems, right? Like if you want to use SQLite in your Ruby gem and it's a system dependency normally, so you'd have to brew install it, you can actually precompile it for like any platform you want to distribute to. It's amazing. And so that solves a lot.
For the people that worked on that and released it, thank you.
Right. So much. I don't know how many.
So much thankless work that goes into that. We're thanking you on this show, so that should be something.
I don't know how many MySQL and Postgres related extension library errors that I helped resolve over the years. Along these ideas, we were talking before the show, like, there's a lot of wishes out there. What we wish Ruby had what we wish the community had available to us. As the AI community is just like exploding across all languages, you try and get onto the frontier so you stay ahead of the game. And it's very hard because Claude Code has made it very clear that they're a node shop and JavaScript shop or TypeScript. And so how do you like get to work with the pleasantries of Ruby and get to like read through some nice abstractions and also fit into that new frontier? And so I have a pretty long list myself, but what are your thoughts?
I think we should jump into it. I have thoughts. I have takes, but you've obviously spent a little bit more time on this. So let's let you kick it off.
Talking about our binary distribution, that would be great. Even just having it so that you can gem install something and it works with one of these agents, that alone would be great, which it can in some ways, but not out of the box.
I had a wish, and I think I'm wondering if it has been granted. For me, an unlikely place. So one thing that has bothered me, so at our company, we've got this split and a bunch of people use either Claude Code or Codex on the command line, but there are a couple of people that still prefer something like Windsurf. I liked Windsurf for a little while and I've quickly transitioned over to the command line. I think it's much better, but I get wanting to have AI in the IDE and I just don't think it's done. This is where we get into like last year versus this year. Last year, when I tried Windsurf, it blew me away and I was telling everybody I knew about it for like 3 months. And now it's a year later, I'm like, it doesn't really do it for me. That's not really fair to Windsurf or anybody else. That's just the reality of AI software development. So here's an interesting thing that has come out, and I'm wondering if you've tried it. Have you tried Steve Yeage's Gastown?
Gastown, there be fires.
What's that?
There'll be fires in Gastown.
Yeah, there'll be fires. Yeah. Yeah. It is an IDE that, I'm quoting here, helps you with the tedium of running lots of Claude Code instances, right? Things get lost. It's hard to track who's doing what. Gastown helps with all of that yak shaving and lets you focus on what your Claude codes are working on. So this is interesting. I never know if I'm reading Steve Yeage, if I'm reading something that he's being earnest about or sarcastic. I remember reading an article last year where he was extolling the virtues of AI prompt engineering. I had to read the article twice. I didn't know if he was trying to pull a fast one on me, but I think he was earnest then, and I think he's being earnest now. And I haven't tried this yet, but I think that is a big deal when it comes to software development in 2026, is being able to actually manage what you're doing across multiple Claude Code instances. What do you think?
I am so torn on this, mostly because this is like extolling one-shot prompting as a virtue.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, let's talk about it.
And so for those of you who don't know, one-shot prompting is really just saying, go do this thing, LLM, and it goes and does it and completes it to finish. And that's more so the more number of things that you add into the puzzle. So Gastown, as an example, is a bunch of agents then working to complete that one prompt that you gave it. The prompt that you give it matters a lot. And it gets more into like this spec-driven development, we've talked about before, where the specification that you give or the plan that you give to it is like the most important then. And so then you end up like writing these very descriptive documents that plan and outline what you're trying to build. A problem I have with that is like, as a builder, the design changes the more that you like work through it and workshop it. Even as you're starting to write out or have an agent write out the things, you may start to notice, oh, hey, this is like not going in a direction that I want. The design would be better in this way. And even if you introduce an agent that sits there and observes and can help redirect, even still, it may not redirect it in a place that you want. And so do you want to manage all of these agents and how they decide to do things? Or do you want to like design things? Right? And you have to pick one. And so like the one-shot prompting approach is really like, okay, like, do I want to learn and set rules that define how the plans should work best? Prompt engineering or context engineering, whatever we want to call that now, right? Do I want to focus on that and like let the things get better, which a lot of people seem to like that idea? Or do you want to make things more of like a sidecar fashion and just help you? And I feel like it's hard because ideally the things will just do the things you ask them to do and they'll do them in the right ways and as you expect. And it's a golden paradise of these agents doing right.
Well, that I hope will do what I tell them to do.
Even with humans. Yeah. Like you can have some brilliant people, right? And like they're working with you and it's not going to be as you expect because like everybody's individual. That's sometimes a really good thing. Exactly. And I mean, that's perfectly fine. But like in terms of like an agent, we have expectations that it's going to do what you tell them to do. If you start to break apart and fragment the things that are trying to do the things that are being told of them, I feel like that's just pouring gas on the fire.
So this brings up an interesting, I think, just tactical question. I think people are curious about this. You've got a very good job. You are working with a lot of legacy code. When you fire up Claude code, you're pointing it at a branch on some stack in Gusto. How are you going to use Claude code? What's the steps in your process?
It depends on the thing I'm trying to do, right? Like, so as software engineers, you have like bug fixes, you have refactorings. Sometimes you have like new features. Sometimes it's a blend, right? Sometimes you're adding something new and you realize that something existing needs to be refactored to reshape and work better with the new thing that you're adding. And so you get kind of like these staged approaches and each use case is different. Some bugs that are really small, like you can get a code to like investigate what happened and create a test that verifies that that actually bug does exist and the test is failing. And then you can have another thing go in and fix that test to be passing. And then you can honestly have some bug fixes just be fully automated, right? Where something's going and investigating and documenting and creating a test and getting the test to pass and pushing the fix. Maybe not pushing it and deploying it. I don't personally do that full automation, but you get to the point where something can be, you could point an agent at this bug that's very well defined. It has a stack trace and you could say, oh, hey, here's Datadog that, had this error and the stack trace and go figure it out, right? And then you can go look and see, oh, like in my personal case, I don't like to automate the solution. So I'll go and I'll just have like, hey, go figure this out. And then let's work on a solution together, right? And so I'm very much like working with the agents. And so I'll do that. And so that's kind of like my workflow for a bug fix.
And so for you, one agent is really enough because you're giving small incremental steps. And then you want to have that kind of feedback so you can continue working in a collaborative fashion.
Yes and no, right? Like, because then there's also like the agents could listen in on a pull request and you can just tag it in and be like, hey, review this thing, which is another use case. Or you have like sub agents that can tie into Claude hooks that can do things. If you touch a certain file, you could say, hey, go run migrations on this thing if you're doing a database, or make sure that this isn't going to break production if it's like got bad indexes on it. Look at the use cases, right? You can get like agents doing work kind of in the background that can help assist you as well. But really they run on their own. They have these preconditioned list of things that trigger them, or like you can trigger them manually. Yeah, still I'm somewhat in control. I guess I'm a little biased because I do have this project, the AI software architect, where there's a bunch of different members, which are kind of agents that act as certain roles, like a backend engineer or a testing engineer, right? Right now, it's just like skill driven. So it's like really just markdown files, but they are kind of like their own agents. And I'll ask them to do like, hey, review the changes that I have here as a collective and tell me if it's any good or what changes you would make. It'll actually go through and Claude will like pull together the individual members and review them with their own personas and what they think about the different changes. And they'll create a little report for me and then tell me like a summary. Yeah, these look good. Or you may want to think about this. And so there is like Swarm by Peruto at Shopify, right? He has this like way of doing it with actual agents that have their own process and they work together as a collective processes, kind of in similar to Gastown, but not.
They send their information back and forth, right?
Right.
So one person finds one person, one agent finds this, they send it to the other agent, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and then they have like a communication layer. I don't know if you've seen the like Claude mailer where someone just made a mail skill and all the agents have to communicate with each other over mail.
Oh, no, I didn't see that. I like that.
That was pretty funny.
You're hitting on something that is near and dear to everybody's heart, which is waste and efficiency as programmers. And I think you have this way, if I can reframe it, right? You've got a way of working that is sometimes sort of one-on-one collaborative and sometimes gets into a point where you're going to get some agents that are going to work fully through a problem, but you're really maintaining the control of synthesizing what the agents go and learn, and of course, of what ultimately gets put back into your repo. And I wanted to highlight this. This is a report from IT Pro, January 16th of this year, so just a few days ago. A survey of more than 1,100 US enterprise AI users from Zapier found that while 92% of workers say AI boosts their productivity, the average employee spends 4.5 hours a week revising, correcting, and sometimes completely redoing AI slop. And so it begs the question then, okay, so are you actually more efficient? Do you only feel more efficient in the moment, but then over time you're losing that time? I think about, you just mentioned email. People in my job, engineers aren't good with email, and I think that's really a testament to how much better that job is than mine. But people in my job who have to communicate with people all day long, if you're running a company, they don't realize how much inefficiency there is in something as simple as email, right? And you really do lose time. You lose tons of time to just things that you think are taking 2 seconds, but they're actually taking 5 minutes, and it adds up. I kind of compare this here. Engineers are moving faster. You can feel the velocity of your movement. And yet at the end of the week, you're giving half a day or more back to the fact that you or somebody on your team moved too fast and created problems. Then you have to look back and say, okay, well, would it have been better to just go slower? And if you were going to move slower, how would you do that? Because we're not saying don't use AI, everybody's using it. But how do you use it most efficiently?
Yeah, it's funny. I have a meeting later today to solve a lot of these, or to try and solve a lot of these problems.
No, solve them. And then we'll record again tomorrow and we'll tell everybody what the answer is.
It's hard because, like we said, everybody works differently, right? Everybody has their own processes. Some people use different editors. Even more abstract than that is like everybody thinks differently. You can't force everybody into a box. And kind of like that was the allure, I think, of Gastown, is like, let the box think. And everybody just talks to it and it goes and does work. And the problem is that like that doesn't work. And so I personally like it to explore new ideas where I'll go and I'll just say, what do you think of this? Like, go implement it. And I'll set up a Docker container and isolate it and just let it YOLO, right? And how far does it get? It helps me think about the design faster because I can see, well, I didn't like this, I didn't like this, I didn't like this. And then I can reframe and create that specification better so that if I did that again, it would be valuable, right? And so it's nice to be able to do that kind of work in parallel and not have to think about it in the moment until you actually get to needing to do it. And so there is a lot of value in it, but I think it's like you can't use it as your work yet. And so like you tell it to do something, you have to be very specific or you're not going to get the result that you want. And you have to have a lot of guardrails. For Claude Code, I use Claude Code almost exclusively now. And I have a bunch of like plugins and stuff that help add the guardrails, but also like help reframe things for the work that I'm doing. So I'm within a certain project. It has a bunch of rules set up. It knows a bunch of information about it. Like that's very specific to the project. And like the output ends up becoming better the more I use it and the more I add to it, that I do end up getting more value the more that I use it. And so I feel like that's kind of where things are moving, and it's a slow process, right? Because you're ultimately having to train this thing how you work, right? And how your project works. And so I'm suspicious that a lot of the naysayers of it just generates slop is really just people haven't used it long enough. And that by the time that it gets trained over, probably takes a solid year of use, right? After that time of putting in the hours, it starts to become a real multiplier of your time. because you know specifically how to use it, but also like the thing truly works better for your specific use case.
Okay, but here's where I'm going to disagree with you. The place where I'm going to disagree with you is that software engineers have always written slop. That's why there's slop in your AI generated code. It's not coming up with stuff out of nowhere. And so you're exactly right that a lot of times it's a misuse of AI that gets you that code slop. In my opinion, it would take both the engineer and the AI to solve the problem. Your claim is that the AI will get better. I absolutely agree. That does not mean that the software engineer is going to get better. Yes, they have to. And yes, I think a long enough continuum, maybe they'll get better. But I think you're always going to have people that are going to make those kinds of mistakes. And thus, you'll continually be in this position. And I think it's interesting that this article takes place. The survey was in the enterprise. I've been there. There's a lot of waste. And there's a lot of non-productivity. There are way more laggards than there are people at the cutting edge in the enterprise.
Yeah, and two, you don't want too many people at the cutting edge at your enterprise all at once.
No, I know, it's by design.
And so, I mean, that's honestly a good thing about enterprise is that it kind of forces you to move slower in some ways. It's hard because there's currently actual value you can get out of using these things the right ways. I guess it's more of how do you get the people that do know how to use it right to teach everybody or make tooling or other things so that everybody else can use it optimally for their own use cases as well. And I feel like that's one of my wishes. More normalization of the tooling, right? Right now it's very much like, oh, here, this is how you do memory. Well, a month later, like somebody else is like, nah, really, you want to do this for memory, right? Or here's how you Kieran from Every, he's like, hey, context engineering, or what is it? Compounding engineering, right? Where you have these tools that like compoundingly get better the more you use them. And that's like, he's built this whole library of things to make that easier to use. Is that normal? Is that the way everyone should use it? I don't know. I've used superpowers for Claude, which is a very popular tool for just normalizing workflow with it. Sometimes it gets in the way. Sometimes I'm like, I just want to fix this bug and it'll try and make a plan around it. I'm just like, I don't really need a plan. And so like, I go turn the plugin off, right? Because I don't want it to get in the way. And so like the normalization isn't quite there to like solve all the use cases. And so that's something I am missing out of, because you don't want to create your own solution and then have a new normal come out and then have to maintain the new solution or migrate to, right? It's like a whole like software adoption problem all over again.
I think that's true. And then there's also the sprawl of it. I think about, you said you use Claude Code for everything. I know plenty of people that are on that boat. I know some, not as many, that are on the OpenAI Codex boat. So I think about it, it's a little bit like Emacs versus Vim, but where it differs is that Emacs and Vim have been around and solidified themselves for so long that if something came out for Vim, even for modern programming, you can bet that the same thing is going to exist in Emacs. It's probably going to exist the next day, right? And that's not where we are. We're not at that kind of parity with these tools, I don't think.
Yeah, totally. Everybody's got their own marketplace now, right? It's like becoming the competing, right? At least it's not a walled garden. That's all I have to say. Please keep it open, make it accessible, right? Like, I feel like we're like kind of getting back to the marketplace competition, right? And like, maybe that's a good thing, but like it does all the standardization, you lose out on so much because it prevents adoption and the slop creeps in, right? And to your point, like, yes, if you have like some bad quality code, it could influence it. But we're almost to the point where like these tools are kind of like helping to solve that and prevent that from happening. Where if you get the right workflow set up, even if it references a file that includes some like bad practices, all of your other context that you're including while you're working through your code, it like negates it. And it says, oh, I see that we're using it this way, but we shouldn't be using it this way. You can get some prompting into your workflow where you can help prevent a lot of that slop. I mean, most of it, to be honest.
I'm with you there, but there still has to be that person who's going to say, you know what, I think this is a good idea. I'm going to coax my AI, or I'm going to allow it to coax me into doing something net positive for my application rather than ram through whatever feature or bug fix I'm trying to do.
Personally, what I see happening is honestly more effort on the tooling, more people building up all of the things that make it more effective and people spending more time doing that. So like all the time that, we're saving using these tools and going so fast is really just getting augmented to make the tooling better. And we're not quite there to like truly get the value that executives hope of it until all this tooling is complete, where it's like very straightforward. You use this and you will be this much better. And I'm suspicious that that will get there in a year. What was that? Claude Code was last year?
Claude Code was last year. I know. The thing that everybody uses now without question came out about a year ago. I keep talking about that to people. It's interesting to me that the story of AI so far has been, you just got to spend the money. You just got to invest in it. You just got to invest in it because it's going to give you these great returns. And I'm not here to say that it's not giving us great returns. I'm an AI optimist. But I will say that the amount of investment, you really can't predict what the return is or when you're going to get that return. And just like you're saying, well, I don't know if the tooling will be there for a year. Well, for a small business like mine, a year is a long time. Maybe in the enterprise, you could say, all right, well, we got to fund this thing for the next year or 2 years or 3 years. It's another zero on the budget. For people that are really trying to harness this today, I think that you've really got to find the people who are willing to put the time in to say, okay, I know that this is a scattered mess of tools and there's plugins everywhere and I need to know where to find them all and what the best ones are and how to vet them and how to plug them into my workspace to make sure that I am utilizing these things effectively. Or you got to have somebody do that and then create a standard across your organization, which, as we've already discussed, is very difficult. I had this meeting with a co-founder of a company we've been working with for years. And it was so funny because he was laying out for me, this is fall of last year, laying out for me what he wanted, like a new sort of organizational model for his PMs, business analysts, and engineers. And he said, I think it should be one PM with one engineer and a business analyst, and we just kind of move ourselves into pods so we can rapidly conduct these experiments and we'll use AI. And it sounded really good in the telling. And I brought that to the head of engineering the next week. And this guy, he was just like, yeah, that's great, but we can't even agree which tool to use. Like, there's no way we can possibly, like, he wants to standardize this across the entire organization. The entire organization is made of AI skeptics, AI enthusiasts, people that love Claude Code, people that want to use it in the IDE, people that just want it to check their code. And so the idea of standardizing at that point to this person seemed crazy. And I get that. I really do. It's a hard decision to make, especially when you have limited resources.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you make a great point. There's no answer for them either, right? Like, it's not like you can go out.
I kind of just laughed and said, well, yeah,
right. People hope like, okay, I'm going to buy Cursor for my team and then they're just going to be so performant. And there's like so much like setup and configuration you got to do to make that true. It prevents people from buying it, I think. That brings me back to another wish.
Yeah.
Right? Is what would be great for the Ruby community specifically is to have solutions to specific problems that are well packaged and standardized. So you want, as an example, to write idiomatic Ruby. That's what you want. Oh, you just go and you use this plugin. Or you want to use RSpec using the better specs specification. Go use this plugin. Very specific use cases, but even more abstract than that, right? Like going to the Jumpstart Rails. Oh, I want to sell subscriptions. I want a web app that does that. Well, here's a plugin or a tool, and you just use it, and it'll generate the subscription.
Yeah, I thought that's right. We're going with that. We don't have to start with the bare bones anymore. It doesn't have to just be Rails. You can have 500 different kinds of Rails apps now, and you just pick one.
And maybe Rails isn't the right solution for every problem, right? I know.
You're going to cut
it. Blasphemy. Maybe using something like Jeremy Evans' tools. Oh, I'm trying to remember his web server.
Oh, Quinto. I never used it.
Quinto, that's new. Oh, Rhoda. Right? So like Rhoda's like kind of like the middle ground between Rails and something like Sinatra. Maybe something like that would be more performant for a specific task. Maybe using the dry suite of framework gems would be better use for very specific tasks, like where you need some kind of like definitive like business logic that goes through a well-defined set of processes, right? Or Trailblazer, or any of these other existing Ruby projects that have been curated over the years that are great at solving very specific problems, like just making something that makes it easier to use those for the specific context, right? I feel like there are so many wishes in there, but it's really one idea of just making standardization out of these tools so that it's easier to use them.
I like that idea a lot. And what you suggested actually made me think of something that when we had Obi on the show, it was a while ago now, but he had said something like, well, it's still going to be really valuable to have basically my brain on a particular problem. I have to agree with him. And this is a hokey sounding thing that I still think would be valuable, is like you said, well, I want the plugin that gives me idiomatic Ruby. Well, if that's the case, then I want that thing to be like the Sandy Metz code whisperer, the Justin Searles code whisperer. Because when I read, I'm always looking at these articles, here's how I set things up. Here's what I say to Claude, and here are my markdown files, my instruction files. And I know those things are rapidly changing and evolving, but I would still want it, even at a point in time. And I think let's add Valentino to that. What's the code name? The code whisperer that's going to get me the generated Ruby code that he would get. I know it sounds hokey, but that's my wish list. So Sandy, if you're listening, we want the Pooter AI code gen.
You're not wrong. Like, I imagine people would pay hefty prices on a subscription basis for access to Sandy Metz, especially if she packaged up all of her knowledge, all of her like personality, and I am sure she has it documented, right? And just like rented it out as an agent.
And that it's updating, right? So I pay a subscription fee because as she's writing code, she's updating it.
Right. And she's thinking about new ideas and creating new abstractions and thinking about high level organization structure and teams and how they work together. And you can use her in different ways. Say you want to analyze, your organization structure and try and like make sure that your services are like abstract and object oriented enough. Having her go through and analyze all that, and like even drafting plans for a higher model, have her like approve the plan.
Yeah. I was thinking, Matt, you took the words right out of my mouth, because I have this like big refactor that I'm scheduled to work on for this enterprise that wants like an enterprise version of Phoenix. And I know what I want to do, and I got a plan, but I'm like, I don't know. It would be nice if I had somebody like Sandy or Obi to say, yeah, this is a good plan.
Right. Because,
an AI version. Yeah.
She'd spend like 30 minutes on it and be like, well, these two things you don't want to do. Right. Or like differently, they're just like a glance. And I feel like that's definitely calling out some limitations of these things, right? Yeah, you can build a persona all you want, but it's still going to take them days to get to the point where a glance, the speed is definitely not there.
That's true.
Or quality.
But, for like $29.95 a month,
that's true.
Get a little taste.
I made a GPT on ChatGPT, like one of the extensions. One of my first ones was the software architect mentor. And I literally just like uploaded all the books that I had available and put it into the context or knowledge base of this agent, and was just like, follow these books for guidance on code generation. It was like awesome. Honestly, it was great. I took that down because I don't have permission to put their books into like a we use it, right? Like, yeah, well, I do, but but even still, like, I would love if somebody packaged that up and like made it distributable, right? And so I could just be like, hey, search the knowledge base of these books. What I found was adding the wrong book actually made the output worse, depending on the use case, right? And so something like the clean coder, which is like very enterprise thinking, if I'm working on a small open source project, create all these crazy abstractions I didn't need, right? Or want.
That's really funny.
And so like maybe I don't need that in all cases, right? And so having something selective where you're just like, all right, let me spin up an agent that has these resources, right? And I would love to see that.
I would love to see that too. I think we've talked about this on the show. The GPTs seemed like a commercial miss by OpenAI, but they still are, as like an internal, at least for me, internal or team-wide tool, they're really valuable. They're very easy to make. I mean, you ask ChatGPT to help make it for you. And like you said, you start uploading documents, start uploading books, and the thing just takes off. I find them really, really useful.
I know we're coming close to time here, but I just thought of something that's super controversial. I saw it in my LinkedIn feed this morning, and it was somebody, author of many popular open source projects, saying that they were going closed source and that the monetization strategy of open source is broken now, because as somebody who made open source projects in order to get more business for themselves and to get more influence, right? And people going to their open source projects that knew about them, which made incentive for them to keep building stuff. Since that's broken and no humans are actually looking at their documentation or their projects anymore, that they no longer get the benefit of maintaining and open sourcing stuff. What do you think about this?
My first knee-jerk reaction is that this is so controversial that you can't even say the person's name. I haven't been able to quickly find it, so I will just react. My first reaction is, I think I'm an engineer turned businessman, and I think that people deserve to get value from the work that they do. So if this person doesn't feel like he or she is getting the same value from working on open source projects, then making it closed source is a viable alternative. You know, we're Rubyists, and so we expect everything to come to us for free. Most of us, I'm not saying you, I'm not saying me, but most of us, we give back very little or nothing. And that doesn't really work, you know, on the grand scheme of things. In fact, it kind of has worked for 30 years. But as things change and things shift, I think that there's room for, I'm trying to avoid saying the word paradigm. It's reasonably, I sound too much like a business owner. It's reasonable for things to shift and for the monetary structure to shift. That's what I'm going for.
I feel like nobody's created something to solve the problem. It's been around a while and people already knew it was a problem. And it's almost like everybody's just accepting the fact that if you have something open source, it's cannibalized by these larger organizations for their monetary benefit. And so like, then it really becomes, well, like, why are you creating it? For me, I just enjoy making things and solving my own problems. Then I have to go and maintain them. Like, it's the maintenance really that, like, how do you then solve that? Does GitHub take on that burden? Who takes on the burden ultimately, right? I think about that too, from like Anthropic's perspective, like buying Bun. Is that the future of like Anthropic, OpenAI, these organizations buying out all of the open source? Or like, how do security updates work, right? Like if nobody's maintaining things anymore or has no incentive to maintain them, right? And I feel like we're going to see that of a lot of drop off of open source maintainers kind of losing a little kick in their step, because the value, if it's not for them, then what is it for?
Well, you know, speaking of cannibalizing open source, you know, we all work on Macs, which just cannibalized Linus Torvalds' open source operating system and decided to make it their own. And then, yes, enterprises and companies large and small do the same thing. When Phoenix started using Flog as a primary thing, we went and started making a donation to that repository. And I was thankful that GitHub had an easy way to do that. Before that, there wasn't even really much of a way to compensate people for their work. Typically, the way to compensate was to, and this I still think is really valuable. And to your point, well, one way that you can help to compensate and provide value is by giving those updates, by using it, learning where there are rough edges or where security updates, for example, are needed, doing them on your project, and then submitting them back to the open source library. And now, is the contention that none of that is happening now either?
I would say so. I would even say that there will even be seen a lag in releases of security where people maybe patch the security and then the contribution back takes longer. I would imagine because like either the maintainers don't have the incentive to like merge it and review it and all of this, or people don't want to spend the time to do that, right? Maybe they have an agent that contributes it,
But like, curious, is AI an accelerant to this downfall of being able to capitalize on open source, or is it just kind of AI exists as we are failing to sort of meet our obligations as open source users?
On the flip side of all of this, open source has never had a great monetary strategy. And I feel like, a lot of people hope that like the whole like GitHub sponsorship stuff would solve that. And it's kind of like it has in some ways for those that like maybe have more popular ecosystem or have more popular repositories, maybe they get sponsorship, right? I know Gusto, we sponsor individual maintainers, right, of the things that we use. Like getting up to the new stuff, right? Like if you want to like create something new, what is your incentive to release that? I think about Obi too, like with his Nexus idea that he's building internally, and he's chosen not to open source it because it's a competitive advantage for his company to not. And like there will be more of that, right? Like what is the competitive advantage for any company to then release the things that they're building anymore? And so to then share it easier with everybody else that has an agent that's just going to scrape it and then rebuild it, right? Like that I worry about from like a giant organization level of like, maybe we'll see organizations taper off from this active spend on open source.
It's possible. I wonder if speed is going to remain the differentiator for these projects and for businesses in general. I mean, speed to market has long been seen as an advantage, but I wonder if quality of execution is going to matter more now. The one thing people talk about with AI is hype and how much stuff comes out. And for sure, in 2025, we saw a new tool per minute coming out. 95% of it was crap, but 5% of it was amazing and really good. And I just wonder, what we were talking about before, you give it a little time and maybe you get it right. And maybe this is me being an optimist again, maybe the spoils accrue to the person who gets it right rather than the person who does it fastest.
Time will tell. There's a lot of wishes out there that I think can make solve a lot of these problems we're talking about.
Yeah. And if the world could just deliver these to us by next episode.
I hope Scott Werner is listening to this and Monkey Paw suddenly just like solves any wish.
Yeah, to solve any wish. He must have made it so that you could talk to it by now.
Right.
So that's really what I want to do. I want to fire it up on my phone.
You want to be able to hold that monkey's paw in your hand and just like speak visceral, right? Yeah, visceral.
Yeah, exactly.
And then as soon as things go bad, you just throw it,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't me.
All right. Well, I think we've hit our limit here.
Yeah. Or you have hit your limit with us, dear listener, and we thank you.
That's right. Hopefully you've made it this far and have listened to our ramblings. But I'm pretty excited about this year. I see so many things happening with the Ruby LLM project and people making use of Ruby for building these things and building on LLMs in general. And it is becoming easier. And I think that we are really poised as a language to really grab the reins of the frontier. And I'm excited.
I agree with you. I feel that way as well.
I have recently, revisited making stuff in Ruby because I just don't want to be building JavaScript stuff. I don't want to be making a Node app for an MCP server, like I can do that in Ruby now.
Yeah, my God. I mean, that's how you know that Claude is being written mostly by Claude. It's because it's in JavaScript.
Right.
No person wants to do that.
A lot of the abstractions just like don't make any sense. And I feel like that's where Ruby really shines, is the right abstractions and object level thinking that maybe an LLM will come out that thinks this way and thinks in objects or better abstractions. But right now it's very much just like, let's just do it. It's like they're on super accelerants and we either slow them down or we don't. But
I feel very confident as well in this year because I think that we've done a lot of proving the technology of AI code gen in general and for Ruby specifically in 2025 and here in 2026 to build on what you said. Yeah, a lot of us are ready to move and ready to build. And at the same time, the confidence across businesses is a lot higher than it was in 2025. And when confidence is high, people spend more money. And when they spend more money, they're going to invest in the kinds of things that we can do. And that makes for an exciting year.
Yeah. See you soon.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Sounds good.